But joining us on the program right now, I am very pleased to have with us Scott Bach from the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Club. Scott, thank you, sir, for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you, Cam. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of this show.
Well, you know, a few years ago, you wrote an essay, The View from Ground Zero, talking about your time spent there at Ground Zero right after the 9/11 attacks. And I have to say, it was incredibly powerful reading, Scott.
Well, thank you. My goal in writing it, and it was written shortly after my experience at Ground Zero, was the purpose of that essay was the experience I had was so deep and so profound and so life-changing that I wanted, in a short space, to be able to convey, to let people step into my shoes and get a taste of what it was like, because the meaning of being there and the experience of being there and what the change that it made in me, in who I am and what I believe and what I know, was something I felt needed to be shared. And so, I appreciate the comments about it. It's hard for me, even to this day, to read it, because it brings back so much emotion and feeling and of the experience of being there.
One of the things that you wrote about, Scott, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but you lost a friend that day.
I did. Actually, a law school buddy of mine named Glenn Winnick, who was also a volunteer fireman, and he happened to work a few blocks away from the World Trade Center. And so when people were running out of the World Trade Center, he grabbed his emergency gear, left his office, and went in. And he never returned. And to this day, I'm haunted by his memory and by I saw him about a week and a half at a friend's wedding before 9/11, and nobody heard from him after that. And he was one of the later persons or victims or heroes to be identified. And it's when it hits home, it's I don't even know how to describe it. It's just the shock and the reality of it really sets in. His particular case is especially poignant. It was not his job to go into the burning building. Okay, he was a volunteer, but he went in and he paid for it with his life. And I remember when we were in law school, Cam, he was still a volunteer fireman. He used to, we were all studying on the weekend, and we'd come in Monday, and he'd talk about, running into burning buildings on Long Island, where he was a volunteer fireman at the time. And anyway, this was one of the nicest human beings you would ever meet, just instantly likable, and the kind of person you would say something like that would never happen to a guy like that.
Yeah. But you wrote, Scott, and I thought it was interesting. You wrote, Ground Zero lingers as a monument to our complacency, to our false belief that evil does not exist tangibly in this world, that we are immune from it, and that we do not need to be vigilant and prepared to deal with it. President Bush, speaking in Shanksville, Pennsylvania yesterday, said one of the lessons of 9/11 is that evil is real, and so is courage. And while you say Ground Zero lingers to that belief, that false belief that evil doesn't exist, the memory of your friend Glenn and how he lived his life, frankly, how he chose to die, frankly, I think reminds us as well of the second part of what President Bush said, that courage is real. Goodness is real in this world as well.
There's no doubt about that, and it's a great contrast. At the time I wrote the essay, I was focused on, let's say, the lesson, one of the great lessons, and I think the president really pointed out the flip side of it, and and that's the hopeful side of it. But I will tell you, Cam, I was there a couple weeks after the explosions and the bombings, and I was down there in my own capacity in law enforcement, also as a volunteer, and I stood 1 foot from where the North Tower used to stand while the fires were still burning. It took us 20 minutes to, stop choking from the smoke before we adjusted to it, and there was a tangible presence of evil there. You could feel it. It was real, and I wrote this essay in 2001. That's when I penned it, and the lesson was that evil was a purely intellectual concept to most Americans. But it was so tangible, so real. You know, what I like to say is that there was almost a field of energy over Ground Zero back then that pulled you into it. When you stepped onto that site, it was like a magnetic force, and it took control of you, and you lost your identity in it. You didn't matter anymore, you know, and that was my experience. I lost all sense of self for the time I was there, and I understood in my gut, not just in my head, I understood what it means to give your life to a cause, okay? Because as I stood there looking at this, I couldn't move, Cam. My feet were planted. All I could do was move my eyes and my head a little bit, and just taking this all in. And it was way more vast and larger, more powerful than the media was able to portray it. And, you know, what I'll tell you is, you know, in that moment, if I could have given my own life to undo the whole thing, I would have done it in a heartbeat. My life didn't matter anymore. Okay, my identity was gone. It was absorbed in this horrific occurrence, and you know, I don't even know how to describe it in words, but I got in my gut what it means to give your life to a cause and to be prepared to sacrifice everything. Those are often words we just use, but I got it in my gut, and you know, I didn't matter in those moments. And you know, one byproduct of it is, you know, once you get to that point, you know, the idea of death is no longer, it's not as scary anymore. You know, once you come to the place where you understand there are things that are more important than your own life, then it opens up you know, a whole other world. So pretty intense, but it was an unbelievably intense experience, profound, disturbing, life-altering, and I feel honored that I was able to be there and experience it. I wouldn't, as horrific as the experience was, and believe me, for me, compared to many others, it was not a big deal, but I wouldn't trade that experience for anything, because it gave my own life a new meaning.
Well, and I think, as you say, as horrific as it was, to be a part of that, and clearly, Scott, I mean, you certainly got what it's like to be something bigger than yourself. You know, while you were down there, you talk about it being a life-altering experience. How has your life changed in the years since 9/11?
Well, I can tell you that there's no room for anything that doesn't belong. In other words, you know, before I would put up with a lot that I won't put up with now. I'm very focused on the things that are important in life, and completely unapologetic for the things I believe. You know, I was at that time I was just becoming a Second Amendment activist, and what this did is it you know, I'm in the Northeast where, you know, if you step out and stick your neck out, sometimes you get your head chopped off if you take on an unpopular cause.
Right. I
lost any concern about that for myself, and it took all my inner convictions and it ramped them up about 10,000%, and I was no longer concerned about what people thought of me. I no longer became concerned about losing clients because I'm working on something that's unpopular in the Northeast. I just poured myself into the things that I believed in. My convictions in life intensified, like I said, 10,000-fold, and I just put everything I have into what I work on. It just made me value life more. It made me value freedom more. It made me understand that because there is evil in this world, and it's tangible, and it's real, and it's on our front doorstep, and it would like to erase us from the planet, how important it is for organizations, you know, like Second Amendment organizations and law enforcement organizations and all the good, solid organizations. The work they are doing is so important, because on this planet there is a delicate balance, and good people have to stand up and resist evil and stand up to it and fight it no matter what the cost. You know, when I was a kid growing up in New York City, you know, being safe was, was a very important thing to me. Mm-hmm. And I no longer move toward safety. Okay, I move toward principle, and I don't care whether it's unsafe for me. Okay, I will go after the principle I believe in with everything I have, just total congruency. So this was long-winded answer to a simple question, Cam. It just made me more of who I am, and it made me care more about life and defending life, and freedom and defending freedom, and standing up for what is right and good, no matter what the cost. So that was my takeaway, and it was pretty potent for me.
Scott, listen, I can't thank you enough, sir, for coming on the program tonight and spending some time with us. Thank you for everything that you do, sir, and I look forward to seeing you down here later this week during the NRA board members meetings.
Thanks, Cam. It's a privilege.
Thank you, sir. Scott Bach joining us from the Association of New Jersey Rifle and Pistol Clubs, member of the NRA's board of directors as well.